Hello, everyone. Today, my guest on One Take with Jess is a volunteer firefighter slash fitness guru, um, everything about health that you want to know. And he does it all on camera. He's been putting Facebook Lives out there with his entire fitness regimen. And he's just an inspiration to people who want to help other people and to stay in shape. And he also now has a podcast. So I pulled him on to chat with me real quick on this Sunday afternoon. What's up, Brian?
Hey, Jess, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm excellent. Thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you have such a legit setup. Like you have the microphone and the headphones. I'm just sitting here with my cat behind me, meowing like the god darn thing is in heat. But
That's all right.
hear
That's
that?
all right. It sounds great, and yeah. Listen, it all works, right? I tend to go head first into something when I decide to do it. So it always comes with gear, you know.
That's right.
Everything
Does
comes.
that
with
come with
gear.
an oxygen tank too?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Not yet. We'll see. We'll see. So far, so good. But
I'm going to
yes,
have
I
to
think.
pause for 1 second here, and I'm not even going to hit pause, but I do have to kill the cat, and I will be right back.
Okay.
Oh, gosh. Okay, Leo. Leo, say hello to everyone. Everyone, this is Leo. Okay, go play. Okay, I'm back.
All right. So where do you want to start?
Well, let's see. What is your latest is the podcast, but I want to backtrack before that.
Okay. All right.
And you started basically getting into fitness. You have always, I think, been into fitness, but you
So you know, physically I have always looked the same, and I talk about that all the time. Like people really looking at my high school self and my 20s self versus looking at me now, like the frame has always pretty much been the same, you know. I thank mom and dad for that, and just good genetics, you know.
yeah, you're one of those naturally
Yeah,
skinny, healthy looking people.
right. But I wouldn't say that I've always been healthy, you know, per se. You know, I went through my McDonald's phase like everyone else in their teens and 20s, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And you know, I wasn't always the healthiest of eaters. I wasn't always a consistent exercise person. But you know, I've been a volunteer fireman now for 30 years. This is my 30th year this year. And I had some
And you
things.
started when you were a
I,
teenager.
I started when I was 20. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to be 50 this year. So I started when I was 20. And, you know, I started that, and I kind of call myself a career volunteer at this point, you know, because something I love, which I've been dedicated to. I've been, I've been able to do some other things because of my volunteerism, the podcasting eventually being one of them. But you know, one of the bad statistics in the fire service in general is just the number one killer of firefighters every year is due to heart related cardiac events, you know, due to stress and overexertion.
Yeah.
You know, and the problem is it's changing, but it is a male dominated career, I would say. That is changing now, which is good to see over the last probably decade or so. But you know how guys are, they don't, you know, they don't want to go to the doctor, and they don't want to always take their health very seriously.
Right.
And
So it takes a fellow firefighter to call them out and be like,
yeah,
listen, guys, you know, you're dying and you're fat and
right,
you're out of shape.
yeah,
And we need to take hold of this as brothers, as, you know,
yes,
comrades, as a group.
yes,
So were you
yeah.
met with resistance when you basically
Well,
said
not,
that?
you know, I wouldn't say resistance. See, on the career side of the fence, the guys that do it for a living, you know, there are some guidelines and standards that, you know, that kind of, plus they're working every single day, you know, doing
Mhm.
the job. So, you know, it's slightly different for them when it comes to physical fitness. Not that there aren't overweight and out of shape career guys, there absolutely are, but you know, on the volunteer side, when you're only doing it, you know, when the pager goes off, and depending on your community, that could be, you know, once or twice a day, it could be once a month, you know.
Hmm.
So it's kind of hard to get people to buy into, listen, this is a job that can kill you regardless of whether you're getting paid for it or not, and you need to be the best version of yourself, because what you're doing is not normal, you know. When that pager goes off at 2 o'clock in the morning and you go from dreaming about whatever it is you're dreaming to, you know, I gotta go, it's
Yeah.
just, you know, it's just a shot of adrenaline, it's a rapid increase in heart rate, and you know, it's not normal.
Right.
So I wouldn't say I was met with resistance. You know, there's always people that are going to look at what you're doing and they're like, you know, who the hell does he think he is? You know, like
Yeah.
what's up with Solar? Why is he, you know, why is he working out on camera for everybody to see? You know,
Hmm.
and I'm kind of used to that at this stage in life. Like, doesn't really bother me much anymore.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that, you know, if you stay consistent, you continue to just try and inspire people, that you I have seen that you eventually see people come around that you would never ever expect to come around.
Yeah.
You know,
And the
like,
naysayers are like, well, I can't frazzle him anyway, so I'm just going to drop off.
right. Move on to the next person, you know,
Exactly.
that we can try to frustrate. But you know, so it's been fun. I've enjoyed doing it. It's helped keep me inspired and motivated to be a better version of myself, you know.
Yeah.
um and look, I wasn't always like that, honestly. What my wake up call was when my dad had a heart attack. And you know, and my dad was always, you know, growing up, you know, a runner, good shape, took care of himself. My mom cooked right, you know, did everything that I thought was correct. And you know, he started having some chest pains, like a lot of people, ignored them, didn't tell anybody about them, you know, went on with his day to day. And then eventually, you know, that day came where he was having a real heart attack and had to go to the hospital. And thankfully, you know, everything worked out. He's still here today. He's probably a healthier version of himself because of it. But you know, here I am looking at, you know, somebody that I've idolized, my dad, and I'm like, oh Jesus, you know, if it could happen to him, it can happen. It could absolutely happen to me. And that was kind of my wake up call to start really
Yeah. So
dedicating myself.
how long have you changed your regimen where you're now focused on fitness more than you ever were before? And does that include eating well?
Fairly well. So
Well, bitch.
I would say 2013 through 2014, somewhere
Okay.
around there is kind of where I made the switch. Um, Look, we don't eat unhealthy. Like, we're not a fast food family, you know,
Mhm.
and you know, but I like to indulge. I like, you know, French fries. I like pizza. I like, you know, I like all the stuff that.
Isn't that a food group?
Yeah,
Isn't there a
sure,
pizza
yeah,
food
yeah.
group?
The
'Cause
fried food group, yeah. Now I can throw it all in the air fryer and say that it's healthier, you know.
my God, this
But
cat is relentless. She was fine. That yelp
yeah,
when I pick her up, that's how
uh-huh,
she just like, yeah, I didn't
yeah,
do anything bad to her yet. She's
yet,
pushing
right.
my buttons.
But yeah, you know, I mean, I would say you know, I don't drink, so I cut out soda years ago. I don't drink, you know, I'm not a big sugar person. I cut sugar out of my coffee. You know, 99% of what I drink is water. You know, I'm not a meal prepper or anything like that, but yeah, for the most part, we eat pretty healthy.
Okay, good. And tell me about your exercise regimen because I know I see in your videos sometimes you're just like, I don't want to do this. Total
Yeah,
true confessions. I don't want to be doing this right now, but I'm gonna get it out of the way. And
yeah,
honestly, that's the majority, I think, of how people approach most exercise. They just want to
yeah.
grudge through it. You have your standouts that are just like so, excited to do it, but I don't know.
Yeah, you know what, the average person that tells you they love exercising, you know, that's probably not the average person. I mean, I enjoy it. There's days where I come home and you know, whether I'm doing it in the morning before I leave for work or after work, there's days where I just obviously it's not what I want to do, And the good thing is, I follow a lot of people on social media now that kind of do the same or similar to what I do. So a lot of times on days like that where I would rather just hit the lounge or hit the recliner or do anything other than exercise, I'll scroll my social media and I'll see somebody I follow doing what I don't want to do. And I'll be like, damn, they did it today. All right. Well, I guess I gotta suck it up and go do it.
Right.
And usually once I get started and I'm done,
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. I feel better. I just generally feel better. Um,
You know,
but
by the way, that when you do that and when you persevere and you get online and you're like, I don't want to do it, but I'm going to do it. You just said how you look at your social media and see that person who did it, which makes you
right.
want to do it. But then you actually end up being that person that makes me want to do it. Because I go on and I'm like, he had a hard day and he went and did it. I didn't even have a
Yeah.
hard day. I don't even have that excuse, oh gosh, I guess I'll freaking do it.
Yeah. And look, and that's that's the name of the game is inspiring others to do the things that they may not want to do, but to keep them on that path.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the hardest part sometimes is just staying committed, and that's one of my favorite hashtags I'm always using is hashtag stay committed because once you get into a routine, it's easy to stay in that routine. Not easy, easier to stay in that routine. But once you get out of it, it's harder to get back.
Yeah.
So
Which is,
uh,
yeah. And the word commitment means that you are staying into a routine. That's your commitment. But to
right.
stay committed is to even make sure that you're committing to that commitment even
Sure.
harder.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fun.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think the reward comes after the exercise is done. You're like, I did it, which is
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And look, I always, there's days I come home from work and like I said, it's the last thing I want to do. And maybe I had a crappy day at the office. Maybe it was just hectic, whatever it was. I'm just not in that mental space. And for whatever reason, whether it's go down the basement and fire up a program that I'm following, or just put my running shoes on and hit the street and go run for a couple miles, more often than not, when I'm done, I feel better. Like
Mhm.
I just overall feel better. Like the stress from the day is gone. It's like, all right, I'm like, all right, now I can move on and like enjoy my evening or whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yeah.
It is a stress reliever.
So let's go back to the time when you called out a lot of people and said, to your fellow firefighters, your fellow volunteers, you need to get yourself back in shape. You need to take hold. What sort of percentage of people were you able to communicate and really resonate with, or them resonate with you in making some life changes? Or do you feel that those kind of fell on deaf ears and people were so ingrained in their own
Uh,
behaviors that it was very hard to change?
no,
Have you moved the needle?
I know because I've had quite a few people, and I kind of wish I had kept like a whiteboard somewhere with like hash marks or something. But over the years, I've definitely had people that I don't know at all, from anywhere in the country that have reached out to me just out of the blue and been like, "Hey, man, I just wanted to reach out and say thanks. I've been following you for a while.
Mhm.
Some will actually say I've been following you for a couple of years, and you kind of got me back to realizing that I needed to do something for myself. And, I've lost X amount of weight, or I've done this, or I went out and I ran a half marathon, or, I've definitely had quite a few of those conversations. Um,
Is that weird? I mean, is that weird? You're just one person
it's weird.
who just started broadcasting, your fitness goals and why you're doing it, and then you've gone and touched people's lives that you don't even know, and you've affected their life possibly even forever.
Yeah, yeah. When I first started, um, this. I mean, when I first started, I started in like that whole beach body community, and that was
Yeah.
like kind of that's what got me into it because I was never a gym guy. I never. Anytime I would go to the gym, like if I had a dedicated partner, um, I would go. But as soon as our schedules didn't mesh anymore or whatever, and I didn't have somebody to keep me focused. It was just like, I'd make that payment every month and barely ever use it.
Yeah.
So I've never been a gym guy. And when this thing happened with my dad and I decided, I got to do something, I bought a Beachbody program on Craigslist. Whatever. So I decided I want to do a show and tea program. I go on Craigslist. I find a program that I want to do. I meet this guy in a parking lot. It was like a drug deal. He's selling me this DVD set, and I'm meeting him at a parking lot with cash. And I'm like, what am I buying here? So like that was like the turn for me. Was I brought that thing home. I stayed committed to it. I finished the entire program, did it a second time, finished the entire program. Then I kind of got immersed in that whole Beachbody community. And whereas I'm not doing that aspect of it anymore, like the sales aspect of it, I am, but I'm not. Like, it made me realize that you can use this influence,
Mhm.
that you can take this influence of sharing your story, your journey, your why, and you can inspire people to be better. And I've always had a passion for my firefighting. And I get to instruct I get to instruct young firefighters as well.
Mhm.
And I said, what, I'm going to take take what I've learned on this journey and make it not so much about selling the product anymore, but helping people be better, regardless of how they do it. Right.
Yeah.
I don't care if they find something on YouTube that they like,
Right.
that's free. Great. Do it, commit to it, whatever. Find something that you like and that you can stick to.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's weird sometimes when somebody reaches out to you with one of those messages, but you know what? It makes you realize that what you're doing is actually being listened to.
Yeah, for
Because
sure, definitely. And the fact that you can influence young firefighters, like you were just saying, is that something that was taught to you by any of the procedures and protocols and information that they used when you were coming up in the volunteer
Oh, absolutely.
fighting
Yeah.
role?
Yeah, look, I've had some phenomenal mentors in my career.
But
And yeah,
was fitness one of the
nah,
priorities that they really drilled in? And do you think it should be more part of the whole, you know, curriculum, in the sense that this is extremely important and we haven't really stressed it enough in the
yeah.
past? But
Um, so in answer to the first part of your question, no, there was nobody really along the way that stressed that to me.
mhm.
I kind of had to figure that out on my own, and I knew. And I tell the story of being in my gear at a structure fire, fully encapsulated with the mask, the whole nine, being inside, crawling through a burning building, and realizing, holy crap, Brian, you're out of shape, because you could tell just by the way you're breathing. I'm like, and I'm like, oh, dude, you need to do something. Like, you're 165 pounds soaking wet, and you're out of breath. Like, you need to. So
Yeah.
I had those wake up moments on my own, which I chose to
Uh-huh.
pay attention to. But as far as the curriculum and the culture, there definitely is more attention to it now than there was probably 5-10 years ago. There's a lot of different people out there, different groups out there, preaching firefighter fitness and the importance of it because of the amount of uh, line of duty heart attack deaths every year.
Is that statistic going down ever since there's been more, advocacy for better health of volunteer firefighters? Like you said, it's different than the employed, the paid firefighters.
Yeah. They generally don't. I'd be lying if I told you what the split was between career and volunteer on those. It is still consistently the number one killer every year.
Hmm.
Um, and I maybe it's gone down slightly, but uh,
Yeah.
not a huge drop.
Okay.
Not like the
Here's
drop we
another
would shoot for.
statistics question. Just if you know it, a stat question.
Mhm.
comparatively speaking to men in general, like you said, it's a very male dominated industry. So I'll just use men as an
Sure.
example. The highest killer of firefighters being heart attacks, how does that compare with just the national average of men, and how heart attacks kill men in general that are not
Yeah.
firefighters?
I don't know. I don't know that stat. I don't know it. Um, you know, the thing is with this career is, and you know, when you look at those numbers, and I follow the line of duties fairly closely. Um, Look, some of them I'm sure are due to things that nobody could, you know, see coming, you know, underlying illness, whatever it may be. Unfortunately, a large percentage of them, um, a good percentage of them are on the volunteer side. And a lot of times they, you know, when you say to people, if you said to the average person, how does how does a firefighter die? They immediately think, oh, you know, in a blaze of glory and a structure fire, and, you know, in this, you know, this being a hero, saving somebody's child, you know, that's, you know, unfortunately, that's, there's no good way to go, but that's not the case at all, you know. And most of these instances aren't even on the scene of an incident. They go home, you know, they go home to their family, and they just got done working a shift, or they just got done working a bunch of calls on the volunteer side, and they go home and they have a heart attack, or they go back to the station and somebody finds them at the station dead on the floor at the station. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
it's yeah, it's
It's hard
terrible.
to hear. It's so hard to hear, but if that's the reality, then certainly that needs to be, you know, addressed. And you're
Yeah.
doing the right thing by just continuing to push for better health and better fitness overall, you know, for
Hmm.
volunteer firefighters.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's a message some people don't want to listen to, and that's fine. You know, I know, you know, I do get the messages every once in a while, or I'll, you know, hear through somebody that, oh, why are you always jumping around on your social media? And I don't do the jumping around stuff as much anymore as I used to. You know, I'm a little I'm a little I'm a little more subdued, and I try to space it out a little bit more, because I don't want to get people to the point where they're like, oh, I'm just unfollowing this guy. He's freaking ridiculous. Yeah, you
Just
know.
sweating all over the mats again.
Yeah, yeah. Like I just got to unfollow him because he's pissing me off. You know,
You do
but
have to continue doing it though. That really, it
oh
always
yeah,
was inspiring. And, you know, to see you hop on and just talk to people, whether you're in your car or, you know, out for a run. And, you know, it really gives us a moment to share with you in your current life, and just see that you're doing it. It's
yeah. Well, I
inspiring.
appreciate that. And look, and now, you know, now I have the personal story to add to it, because, you know, at the end of last year I had heart surgery.
Yeah.
So
We see the scar.
yeah, it's really not much to see. The doctor did a really good job.
I mean, that's a scar down the middle of your chest.
Yeah.
Nevertheless.
Yeah, no, it is. And you know, and trust me, you're talking to a guy who has, you know, my most major injury was like a cracked rib, you know. So I've never had a surgery, nothing, you know. So I went from like nothing for the first 49 years of my life to, let's jump in with both feet and get heart surgery. And let's not make it, you know, let's not make it the non-invasive. Let's go for the full Monty, the cracking of the chest heart surgery, you know.
What did they do?
But
What was the procedure? Why did you need it?
I had mitral valve prolapse, which is basically a leaking heart valve. Been monitoring it for years. I had an episode back in 2016 ish, 2016, 2017, where I got a blood infection. Don't know where from. Might have been from dental work, might have been from a dog bite. Who the hell knows? But that blood infection infected my heart valve.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically got rushed to the city, admitted to the hospital. They thought I was going to have the surgery then. Long story short, I didn't have to, because it was you know, they said it's a non-emergent procedure. So for a few, you know, until last year, I just monitored it with my cardiologist and all my other doctors. And but she kept harping on me saying, listen, you know, you're going to have this thing repaired eventually. You should really consider having it done when you're still younger and healthier and don't have any other things going on in your life.
Hmm.
And I seeked out a specialist and went down and talked to him, and he put a quantitative number to the leakage that I had in the valve, and he recommended that I had it done, you know, within the year. So I did. And look, it was a major surgery. There's no way around, you know, when they crack your chest open, that's about as major as you can get.
Yeah.
Um,
Did they repair the valve or replace the valve? Is it a human
Repaired it.
valve or a pig valve? Oh, it's repaired.
No, no, I don't oink. I don't make any of,
Pig by now.
no, I don't make any strange farm animal noises, anything like that.
Not
They
because of the heart thing, though. Anyway, the farm animal noise come at a whole different time with a whole different story attached to it.
they did repair it. Yeah, they took stuff from other places and
Yeah.
whatever. But you know, look, I had that done in September of last year. I was back to work in 2 weeks. I spent a week in the hospital. I was home for another week, and I wasn't out running around. I was at my desk, you know, at my job, but I was back to work in 2 weeks, and I was back to working out, like some kind of workout, in like 2 months. And I, you know, I say that because I firmly believe that because I kept myself in shape right up until the day before I went to the hospital. I mean, I was running, this thing was done the end of September. I think second week of September, I ran a Spartan race. You know, I stayed at it until like a week before I went into the hospital.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that because I firmly believe that my recovery was only that quick because I kept myself, you know, in the shape that I did, because I took care of myself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I absolutely totally agree. And you know, your recovery and the way that you were back at it within 2 months. You said 2 months after?
Yeah, I mean, not 100%. You know, I just within the last probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks or so got like my push-ups back to where I want them to be. You know, I did a round of insanity here for the last 8 weeks. I think I finished a couple of weeks ago, and I was getting so frustrated with myself because, like, you know, insanity was like my jam. I mean, you watched, you know, jumping around, you know, doing all these crazy burpees, and I was getting so upset with myself because I'd be on the floor and I'd have my knees down, you know, I'd be doing modified
You were doing girly
push-ups.
push-ups?
What's that?
You were doing girly push-ups?
Yeah, I was doing girly push-ups, and I was getting so upset with myself, being like, "Oh, what the hell's wrong with me?" I'm like, I'm over 6 months post-op. I should be banging out these push-ups by now. And you know, certain things just took time, especially anything in the chest area. You know.
Yeah, I can't imagine going from like invasive heart surgery to even like stressing out my heart any bit. I mean, were you nervous about doing any exercise that would, you know, increase your heart rate? And because you just had invasive heart surgery, you know, there.
Yeah. Well, they gave me pretty clear instructions as to what I could and couldn't do. And of course, look, I pushed it a little bit. When I was home for the 2 weeks, you know, they said they don't want you sitting around. That's why they get you out of the hospital. You know, they want you up and about and moving. And they said, listen, you know, go for walks, you know, but don't go too far, you know, just, but keep yourself up, keep yourself moving.
Uh-huh.
You know, don't get sedentary where like you're laying around all the time watching TV. So of course, you know, I'm banging out all kinds of stuff that I've been putting off for God knows how long because I've got nothing better to do. And I'm getting up and I'm walking. And one day I said, you know what? I feel pretty good today. I got up and Kelly was at work. The kids were at school. I got up and I walked, and I live on the top of a hill. So I walked out to the end of my driveway, walked out to the end of the cul-de-sac. I said, oh, I feel pretty good. I walked down the hill and I started walking down the road, and I felt pretty good. You know, I was like shuffle walking. I was taking my time, you know.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And I said, all right, I probably far enough. So I turn around and I'm walking back, and I'm walking up my hill,
Mm-hmm.
and I was about halfway up the hill, and I was like, that was the moment where I realized, wow, you know, I am like, I'm out of breath. Like I don't, you know, I could feel my heart racing. I'm like, yeah, I think we pushed it a little bit too far today, Brian. You know, we're not,
What did you
we're,
do? Were you
we're not going to do
scared?
this again.
Oh,
I just walked home and, you know, sat down and, you know,
ugh,
but no, since then I've been good. It was more nerve wracking for me, you know, prior to than afterwards, because you know they didn't really put any hard restrictions on me as far as anything I could do leading up to the surgery. So you know I was still, you know, hard charging it at the firehouse. I was still doing as many obstacle course races as I could do that summer, and you know
great.
I remember racing one of them. It was hot. It was like 85, 90 degrees, and it was one of the longer ones that I did. You know, I always wear my Apple Watch so I can kind of monitor my heart rate. And there was a couple times I was climbing that mountain where I literally sat down because I thought I was just gonna, you know, pass out.
Wow.
And
What was your heart rate at a point where you thought,
oh, it was up in probably the 170s, 180s. You know, I was probably up in the peak 180s. Um, my average for that event, I think, was in the mid 160s, which wasn't terrible, but it was just the heat and the mountainous terrain
yeah,
and
you
the
felt it.
fact
You
that
felt it. You know
yeah,
your
yeah,
body.
I just felt it. Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
Well, that's good. You've come a long way.
yeah.
And
I feel
continue to.
great now.
There's always going to be setbacks. There's always going to be minor reasons why people need to take a break from their exercise. But you know what?
Sure,
You have a commitment, and when you get into trouble and your health does start to, you know, fail in the future, you fail at a point where you're already up here at a fitness level, and failing begins to only be not as consequential as it would be if you just your fitness level was here and then it drops.
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
that's
And
good.
you know the other big mistake that people make, and you know I had those wake up calls, you know, with my dad and with everything else that went on with me. You know, you can't ignore stuff. You know, I know too many people that still like to ignore warning signs, you know, or don't think that they think because nothing's ever happened to them that they don't need to go get an annual physical, that they like don't need to go get themselves checked out. And you know I know more people than you know than I care to admit that you know things have been found on those annual physicals, you know, that they're still here today because you know they listened to a warning sign. And I'll never forget the conversation I had with my dad when he was laying in the hospital after his heart attack. I walked in, I was like, Dad, what the hell's going on? You know, and I said, when did this chest pain come on? And he's like, oh, well, I was working at the house. I was up on a ladder, whatever. You know, your mother called I said, well, is this the first time you've had it? He says, no. I said, well,
Mhm.
when was the first time you had it? He said, well, now that I think about it, you know, during hunting season, when you and I were out in the woods, I had a couple episodes, but I just let it go away and I kept on walking. And I jumped in his crap. You know, I was like, you know what, Dad? I said, those are the stories that you read about on the news,
Oh
like
yeah,
father and
sure.
son hunting in the woods. Father has a heart attack and dies because they can't get him out of the woods quick enough. You know, I
Yeah.
said, you can't ignore that stuff, you know, and obviously he never has again. but, you know, we all know people that do. They just don't want to admit it. You know, they don't want to listen to that warning sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's good that you read him the riot act, and you know, hopefully he'll be better
Yeah,
for it in the future.
absolutely.
And you've learned, and your whole family has learned. So, how heavy is firefighters' gear when you put that whole contraption on and you're like fully in gear? How heavy is all that to carry around? Just out of
Depending on what you're carrying and how much stuff you're carrying, you're easily adding probably another 80 pounds to yourself. You know, you know, if you're carrying all kinds of tools and equipment, it could be up to 100 pounds, but
gosh. And
it's
then you have
heavy.
to climb ladders and, you know, fit into spaces and
Yeah,
fly
yeah.
blind sometimes because of smoke. And
Yeah, everything we, you know, a lot of the training that we do is obviously, you know, blacked out or in a smoke condition, or because you know most times you don't have when you're in that really bad situation, you don't have the use of your eyesight, especially if you're in that heavy smoke condition.
Mhm.
So we do a lot of training, do a lot of training like that. I mean, the good thing is the gear over the years has come a very, very long way. I mean, I remember my first set of gear was, it was like putting on a canvas tarp. It was just bulky and heavy and didn't bend. Probably took you a good solid year just to break it in where you could move in it. And the last set I got is, as far as firefighting gear goes, it's almost like putting on a pair of broken in pajamas.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it's
good.
it's compared to the old stuff, it's lighter, it's more flexible. It's like anything else. There's constant, progression in the industry
Yeah,
and the technology.
new
But
fabrics.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. None of them are as comfortable as a Throwbie, of course, but you know, little
Thanks for
shameless
the
plug
product
there for
placement
you.
mention. Go ahead, go fight fires in a Throwbie.
Yeah, yeah, no,
I
yeah.
should be doing a podcast in a Throwbie. I was saying like to someone that next time I'll be wearing my Throbies to be doing podcasts.
There you go. There you go. But
So,
yeah.
how's the podcast been going that you're doing? Talk to me about why you're doing it, and what kind of type of response have you been getting from people?
So the podcast has been cool. The response has been overwhelming. Not what I really had no idea what I was getting myself into when I started doing it. I knew I kind of had this small social media following that I could kind of, um, you know, pitch it to. But I started it on almost a separate platform from my normal platform. Um, the podcast is a little different. I do talk health and fitness. I have had a couple health and fitness guests on to discuss firefighter fitness, but the idea for the podcast came to me. There's a lot of, unfortunately, there's a lot of negativity on social media surrounding volunteer firefighters. I mean, there's always kind of been this, career volunteer like riff, like battle per se.
Yeah,
Um, in some places it's huge, in other places you would never know the difference. But there are some social media pages out there that are dedicated and have huge followings, and they're pretty much dedicated to just constantly getting on volunteers, you know,
really.
and yeah. And
Why?
I started watching, like anybody that likes to watch, bad things happen. I started watching these pages, and I started watching them on Facebook. Then I had a couple on Instagram, and I started realizing that some of the things that they're saying on these pages, um, were true. That there's lots of volunteers out there that like to use the fact that we're volunteers
Mm-hmm.
as an excuse. All right,
Not what?
as an excuse not to follow the rules, as an excuse not, just to be able to say, well, I'm just a volunteer, I don't have to do that.
Mm.
There's some very basic rule. I mean, there's tons and tons of rules, but there's, like very basic things that, one of them I can share with you that, anybody listening, it'll make sense once I say it. Like, we're not allowed, as an interior firefighter, I'm not allowed to have a beard. I can't have a beard. I can't have any facial hair
Yeah, it probably
that
prevents the respirator from sticking to your
sealing from
face.
sealing properly.
Yeah,
Right. And that's an OSHA
that's why
standard,
I
right?
don't grow a beard.
What's that?
That's why I don't grow a beard either.
I figured that it wouldn't look good on you anyway, but so so you can't grow the beard, you can't have a goatee, you can have a mustache, and you can come down to like the middle of the lip. That's why they call it the Fidney stash, after FDNY, because those guys have those big mustaches that come down. Some of them do.
Yeah, it is a little.
Um, but so something as simple as that, especially in like rural areas of the country, kind of like Sullivan County,
Mhm.
you'll go places and you'll see all kinds of volunteers with like beards, and look, it's a rule. Is it a rule that is going to come after you? No, not until something bad happens. right?
Mhm.
So me as the chief, I'm responsible for everybody in my department, my operation, my manpower, my, my guys and my girls, I'm responsible for them. So I'm responsible for enforcing the rules and the standards and the guidelines, So, if something were to happen to one of my people, I either get hurt or die in the line of duty in a fire, obviously an investigation comes after that. And, part of that investigation would be, well, why did he was an interior firefighter. He was certified as an interior firefighter. Why do you have a beard? Well, I can't answer that question with, oh, we're just volunteers.
Mhm.
That doesn't work. That doesn't work. So that's just one example of some of the things that get ignored in the volunteer service. So I started watching these pages, and my initial gut reaction was to get pissed off at them. And then when I started seeing some of the things I'm posting, I'm like, you know what? We're feeding their fire. Like, we're giving them stuff to talk about, you
Mhm.
know? And I have always, and I learned this from my mentors before me, I have always treated um, being a volunteer firefighter like it's a profession, right? I still need to do the job the same way as a guy in the Bronx or a guy in Miami, Florida, or I still need to do the job the same way. It's the same fire. We need the same tactics. I can die doing it just like they can, Um,
Right.
so I always kind of had this professional volunteer mindset. And I've always kind of given the young guys, the recruits, the probies, this like talk about, just because you're not getting a paycheck doesn't mean you can be any less professional than the guys that call themselves professional firefighters.
Mhm.
You still need to do the job. You still need to be trained. You still need to act like a professional. So that's kind of where the podcast came from. You know, I, this was, I had been thinking about it for a while, and I decided, yeah, you know what, maybe I'll just jump in with both feet and see how it goes and start trying to really spread this professional volunteer message.
Yeah.
And,
So who are
well,
you
then
talking to when you're speaking about, like on the podcast? Are you talking to professional firefighters and basically giving them the side of what it is to be a volunteer? Or are you talking to volunteers and basically, communicating certain things where you need to, hold yourself to a higher standard?
yes, exactly. My
Cool.
my lane, and most of the people that I bring on the show, their lane is volunteer firefighting. I have had some career firefighters on. Um, most most of the career firefighters I've had on are work somewhere and might volunteer somewhere else, so they're kind of immersed in both worlds.
Hmm.
So they had a kind of a unique perspective. They go to work, but then they go back to their hometown and they volunteer.
Yeah.
So I have had a couple of those guys on. um, so my my lane, my audience is mostly probably 99% volunteer, and
Hmm.
and my message to them is pretty much exactly what you just said. That we need to treat this like a career. We need to do it like a job. That we can't give people the satisfaction of saying, oh, these guys are doing this, these guys are a joke because they're hobbyists. They do this as a hobby. Or they're, pancake flippers. That's some of the other things that I've heard said out there.
Really? Oh my
Oh yeah,
gosh.
yeah, yeah. So
That's
so
harsh. I mean, you
yeah.
guys
Oh, it's,
really
yeah, it is.
put there to save people's lives. You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah. But social media, look, social media doesn't make it, doesn't make it easier. Sometimes it's made it very easy for me to kind of get on and spread the message and get people to buy in. When I say it doesn't make it easy, social media has it made it so easy for anyone and everybody to kind of claim that they're an expert at something,
ugh,
even though they
yeah,
might not have anything to back up
I
that
agree.
expert status. And then, and now you've got things like TikTok, and like TikTok is like, as much as I actually like going on there sometimes and getting a good laugh over some of the stuff that's on there.
Uh-huh.
When I fire it up and I punch in firefighter into the search, and I see people, dancing around in their gear, doing everything in their gear but fighting fire. It's like, really, guys, this is why. Like, I get blowing off steam. Like, I'm not saying that we can't have fun. We
Yeah.
can absolutely have fun, but when I see some of this stuff, I'm like, this is the reason why these guys are just brutalizing us on social media,
Yeah.
is some of this stuff
So
that's
there's
going
no
on.
professional firefighters that are doing like some funny TikTok stuff going on.
There's some.
Not
There's some. No, there are. There's some.
a
There's definitely some, and that's why I don't take it too seriously. It's it's a fine line, I
Yeah,
guess what
it's
it
a
is.
fine line with you being a grumpy old man. Just be like, oh,
Yeah, 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 yeah. But you're right. That's true. That's true.
but
But
I do see that you're trying to bridge the gap at least between professional and volunteer, and even in the title of your podcast, that itself bridges the gap. And you've had on people that are professional and volunteer at the same
yep.
time. What have you learned? Like, has there been anything that any one of your guests have told you, or through your research, that you've learned about the difference between a professional versus a volunteer that you maybe didn't know beforehand?
I'm always learning something, but I think probably the biggest thing that I've learned is, look, I've been fortunate. I've been all over, New York, teaching or listening or attending classes, and been around firefighters from all over the state. And I didn't make up this line. Somebody wiser and older than I did, wiser and older than I did. But, they say that, it doesn't matter where you go, you change the name on the front of the building and you experience all the same stuff. You hear about all the same problems, all the same challenges. And now that my reach and the people that I talk to or that I hear from has broadened out of New York State, and I've got people listening from Canada, from South America, from all over the U.S. And as I engage with these people, I realize that it's not just a New York thing. It's all over. It's everywhere you go.
Interesting.
We all have the same challenges. We all have the same situations that we're dealing with, and that's the other thing. I just kind of wanted to give people a platform to get to know other people
Hmm.
that might be able to help them through whatever it is they're going through. And it's cool. I mean, I've made some friends, obviously during this whole pandemic thing, because I started this. I think my first episode went up like the end of February, and then the pandemic hit. So everybody that I've had on, I've only had a couple people on that I know personally.
Hmm.
Everybody else that I've had on is somebody I met through social media. And like I would, if I could, I would drive to wherever and have dinner with some of them like tomorrow, because we become friendly through the podcast, through social media. It's crazy when you start talking to people about like that 6 degrees of separation. You're like,
Yeah.
people know one another, and it's 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 been
We need
really
to
cool.
eventually turn this into some kind of dating app.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but but it's been cool, but and it's been well received, and that's all I can ask for, you know.
Yeah. Have you upped the number of episodes that you've put out during COVID, um, during this whole pandemic, and also how has this affected firefighters in general in doing their job, or more responsibilities? Are you enforcing rules now that you haven't had to before because of the pandemic?
Oh yeah, so in regarding the podcast, when I first decided to do it, my goal was to put out an episode a week,
Hmm.
and I wanted to do 30 to 45 minutes an episode, right? I didn't want to go too long, too crazy. Um, and I did that for a couple of weeks, and then So now the way I do it is I formally sit down like this in front of my system and Zoom with somebody once a week for a full length episode every week.
Mhm.
Then I started doing a second episode a week because I would have these thoughts that would pop into my head, and I was like, kind of like when I used to do a lot of the YouTube, the Facebook Live stuff. I'd just have like a thought that would pop into my head, and I'd be like, "Oh, this would be good to talk about," but
Yeah,
I
most
don't
of
know
the
if it's
time
really an
when you
episode.
were driving.
Yeah, right. I don't even know. I don't know if it's an episode worth, but God, I really want to talk about this. And I'm with me. Sometimes when something pops into my brain, like I got to do it then. If I wait, if I write it down and I'm like, all right, I'll come back to this for next week's episode, like the fire of that thought is gone, So I kind of got to hit it while I'm thinking of it.
Uh-huh.
So I started doing what I call a mutual aid episode, which is just a shorter 10 to 15 minutes. And they're pretty much usually recorded with my iPhone and my earbud when I'm driving to work. Like
Uh-huh.
on my iPhone, I just hit record and I just start babbling
Yeah.
about
Which is
whatever.
what you used to do. That was the
Yeah,
whole Facebook thing that you hit
yeah,
record and just start ranting.
yeah. Just start talking. Just start kind of ranting.
Yeah.
But as far as the pandemic and how look, it's affected everything. We're kind of coming out of it now. Here, we've loosened up some of our restrictions at the firehouse. We're still not back to normal.
What were
Not
some
that I'm.
restrictions? What were they at the firehouse?
Well, we
You guys are
closed
first responders, so you would
the
think that you would have less restrictions than regular people because you still need to be doing all the stuff that you need to be doing.
we do, but the scare was if I go into my fire station carrying COVID-19 and I infect 10 other guys and
Mhm.
girls at my firehouse with COVID-19, and God knows who else they saw in their day, you could put a station out of service,
Mhm.
with the way they were handling it in the beginning, where it's like, oh, you've been exposed, 14-day quarantine, stay home, don't come out of your house. So what we did was the building and grounds were closed to the public. They still are closed to the public. The firehouse was closed to any non-official business. So the members couldn't just stop in whenever they felt like it. We canceled all our drills. We canceled all our meetings. We were only coming in for emergency response.
Mhm.
So if the pager went off for a call, we would come in. Um, we even changed how we did that a little bit. I changed our amount of people that we would put on a piece of apparatus. I was only allowing 4 people max on every piece of apparatus, so there was some distancing on the trucks. Um,
That did that mean you had to take more trucks?
Well, what we did was we limited it for certain types of calls. So if it was a structure fire or a car accident, where we know we kind of need all hands on deck, there was no limitation. But if it was an activated fire alarm or some sort of alarm, or something that 9 out of 10 times is you go, you check it out, you get back in service.
Mhm.
Those were the calls we limited the manpower on. So it was kind of call specific, I would say.
Right.
Um, and then we would get back from runs and it would be clean and sanitize the truck, clean and sanitize yourself, go home, no hanging around. Like normally the guys come back and they sign the attendance sheet. We weren't even allowing them to do that. Like the officer would take the attendance sheet, one person, one pen, one piece of paper, take
Yeah.
everybody's attendance and send them home. We have, a handful of guys that are over 70 years old.
Mm.
We grounded them for probably a month, said you
Yeah.
can't come to the firehouse,
Did you
you've
have
got
any
to.
cases at all with
What's that?
Did you have any cases at all with the firefighters?
None directly related to the firehouse. We had a couple, related to what the member or their spouse did for their full-time job.
Uh-huh.
But luckily, knock on wood, we've been good. Yeah, we've been good. So it was a challenge.
Yeah.
It's definitely a challenge. You just can't sit back and pretend like it's going on. It would pretend like nothing's happening. And, I was constantly tweaking, rules and regulations and even now that we're slowly starting to open up, thankfully we've gotten back to our training every
Mhm.
week, which is good. But we're doing temperature monitoring. Everybody comes in, we take the temperature before they go home. We take the temperature. We're
Right.
still doing all the sanitary stuff on all the apparatus, and still wearing masks when we need to wear masks, and
Right.
still
How,
trying
how
to
are you
social
doing?
distance.
How are you doing with like interacting with people who are calling, who are in peril? Are you
In the
wearing masks? Are they wearing masks?
in the beginning, it was crazy because nobody really knew what was going on. I think it was everybody was so hyped, from what was really happening, what the media said was happening. It was so crazy in the very beginning. But yeah, I mean, we got the masks. Depending on the call we were going, we don't run a lot of medical response. Our firehouse doesn't. So most of our medical response is going to be part of a motor vehicle accident, or we do cardiac arrests. So we would go to that type of medical response. But yeah, our guys are, our members are wearing masks, and if we're dealing with a patient and they're not wearing one, we'll pretty much hand them one to put on. And
Interesting.
thankfully we didn't get into anything where we had to do the whole Tyvek suit and the you know
Yeah.
yeah, none of that, thankfully.
It is a
But
weird world. It is very strange.
it is, and look, and everything is I don't know, I think this is going to affect us for a while. It's good to see businesses starting to be able to open.
Hmm.
It's good to see some of the local establishments having outdoor dining. And but
Yeah.
it's still weird, that like I still think there's a large part of the population that's, as much as everybody misses that's not ready to like run right out there and go to a restaurant. you know
Yeah, that's true. That
Y-
is true. I think the whole outdoor dining certainly does help ease into the whole thing because you have the fresh
yeah,
air blowing by and
sure,
the viral load is spread out amongst, the fresh air and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
hopefully that helps keep people calm. But, then again, you have your waiters and waitresses either have face masks or
yeah,
face shields and you feel like you're in some kind of dystopian novel where
yeah.
it's weird. It's
it
weird.
it is very
But
weird.
maybe after two drinks, it becomes fine.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Everything has been it's been so, like things that you don't even think about. Like, we had to take the dog to the vet a couple weeks ago. I pull up to the vet and I'm thinking, wow, I'm going to put my mask on. I'm going to walk in with the dog,
Hmm.
and I pull up and there's all these cars lined up outside. And I'm like, oh, you don't walk into the office. They come out,
You
they
come
do
out
all
and
the
get the dog.
yeah, they do all the paperwork of your car. They take the dog, they walk in, they call you to have the consult on the phone, then they bring the dog back out. It's
It's
just
kind of like that. Kind of sounds good. Like
yeah, yeah, it's not horrible, but it's
you were a VIP. That sounds like VIP treatment. They come to
yeah, it
the
does. Yeah,
car.
yeah,
They, bring the dog back to you. A lot of businesses have changed their, the way that they do business to a way that, a lot of things are being expedited. You really didn't
yeah,
have to fill out all those forms that you always have to fill out. We already do have it in the computer system.
right.
So a lot of unnecessary processes have been shaved off.
Hmm.
And I kind of hope that companies do keep it that way. I feel bad for people that may have lost their jobs or, companies that saw how redundant a lot of positions were
Sure.
and how much excess baggage they have been carrying in terms of employees. And it's bad when you have to let half your staff go because, just to be honest, you maybe never really needed them anyway. So
Right, right, right.
businesses cutting down and becoming leaner. Um, Unemployment, that extra $600 is certainly a perk.
Yeah.
I hope people do find employment soon because I don't know what's to be for the economy.
Yeah, yeah. I've already seen a couple sides of that $600 perk. And again, it depends on, it's people driven, like there's
Mhm.
people that want to get back to work. And while they, I mean, there's people that are making more sitting home than they were at their
Hmm.
job, because of the
Yep.
perk. And the unfortunate side of that now is you see some people that you're like, all right, it's time to come back to work. And they're like,
Mhm.
well, I'd much rather stay home, which,
Yep.
it's a double-edged sword. I always try to look for something positive, and in my realm, well, in the fire realm, one of the things that, and this probably goes, I imagine this goes across many industries, one cool thing that I have seen is, we've always been a traditionally hands-on world when it comes to training. Like, you go to a location and you sit down and you take a class, whether it's a lecture class or a hands-on skills class.
Mhm.
You go to a conference, you go to a classroom, you go to a lecture. There's been so much unbelievable content that's been put out during this whole COVID thing on platforms like this, webinars, Zooms. Look, they'll never take the place of that, sitting in front of somebody, listening to somebody speak.
Yeah.
But I think you are going to see more of this kind of stuff,
Yep.
because there's definitely a place for it, and I mean, there's been some content put out, on whether Facebook Live or YouTube or a podcast that I would have never got to see,
Hmm.
because I just can't travel halfway across the country to see it, but
Yeah.
it's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. And let's see, your daughter just graduated
She
from
did.
high school. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
What was that like? What did they do up there? What was it? Monticello? What kind
Yeah, it was.
of
Listen, we had a Zoom with the principal last week, a bunch of the concerned parents.
Yeah.
Because again, you're watching the governor, and he's, stuff is changing every day, and he's, the regulations are changing, and we had a Zoom meeting with the principal, who's a super guy, and really, does his best for the kids. And we had this Zoom call about, what can and can't be done, and what are you guys doing?
Hmm.
And then, of course, 2 days later, after our Zoom call, the governor comes on and says that they're opening up graduations to 150 people. So, like, we still can't do it because the class was 200 and something, family and friends, whatever. So,
Really? They couldn't figure
yeah.
out a way to design to like
Yeah.
divide the alphabet and
Well,
this
so
happened.
they already had all these plans in place, and that message came out. Graduations started this past Tuesday.
Hmm.
I think the governor put that memo out on like Sunday or Monday. So it
Uh-huh.
was like, it's kind of too late. Um, but it was nice. They had like stations set up. They had their traditional stage walk where she came down the aisle of the auditorium and went up to the stage, and she got her diploma, and she went across the stage and stood there for all her pictures. And
Oh, that's
then,
perfect.
yeah, and then they come down and they went to another station where they signed the class mural that'll go up, and then they had a cap toss station, and so they had all these four different stations, which was nice. We were able to bring 6 people, so obviously it's not, she had, obviously, her brother was there, Kelly and I, my dad, Kelly's parents, so that was her 6, her
Yeah.
niece, or her cousin, my niece,
Yeah.
and
Probably the
extended.
usual crowd. The
Yeah,
usual.
yeah, the usual, pretty much the usual
She'll
crowd.
remember this forever. All these kids will remember this. They graduated during the
Yeah,
pandemic, and schools and kids have been so resourceful. And a lot of times the principals have been putting it out there to the students, like,
sure.
let's come up with creative suggestions, let's think out of the box, and just the ideas that have come forth have been
Yeah,
so memorable, and
yeah,
know that they're graduating, and to know that they're even, doing this during this time when they're going to remember is it's just something that's so beyond the norm that it almost makes it good in a way.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I from what I'm told, they're going to take all of those clips of all the kids and put them together, so they'll get a
Compilation
DVD
DVD.
or whatever, a compilation of their whole class graduating, which is nice. And we've got some other stuff planned on the side. I mean, there's a few parents that have gotten together that are planning like almost like a privately sponsored graduation. So we're gonna we're gonna try and get that, because you know, we didn't get to hear any of the kids' speeches. You know, you know, you didn't hear any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the plan. But they did the best that we could do, and all we can hope for now is that college starts when it's supposed to.
Yeah.
You
Where's she
know,
going? Where's she headed?
she's going to Oneonta State.
I knew Oneonta.
So yeah, so she's heading up there, and she's running cross country and track and field for them. So you know,
That's
she's supposed to head up August.
mm,
So
okay. Well, let's see what happens. It's
yeah,
not like it's a New York City type, university.
right.
It's out in the great wide open, and hopefully they'll figure it out. My son is
Yeah.
going back to school as well. I
Is he
think.
gonna go back?
Well, we get the official word tomorrow from Penn
Yeah.
State. They're putting out an official, declaration of what their intent is.
Mm-hmm.
I think they'll bring the students back on campus. I mean, I think that's what the universities are all trying to do.
Yeah.
Want to get the tuition dollars in. It's the
Sure.
best way to get the tuition dollars in is to, make a plan to bring the students back. As far as the students staying in school, I mean, you're going to have to see what happens with the rates, with the
Right.
positive testings, and see if it starts going up. And if it goes up, I'm sure it'll shut down. I'm sure we'll be back online, and
Right.
we'll see what happens. But, they're giving
Well,
their best try to bring everyone back on campus, and we'll see what the official declaration is from Penn State tomorrow.
yeah. Well, and I know you had been posting some questions there about, you know, what do you do? I mean, you're paying an exorbitant amount for tuition, and you know, to send somebody off to school and pay tuition when they're just going to have them do school online. You know, you're like, you know, it's a valid question. You know,
Yeah,
you can do school online through community college for a lot cheaper. Yeah.
that's true. And you know how you said, like, whenever you get your thoughts, you have to record them and,
Right.
put them out there, because then they go away. But when I get my thoughts, I'm usually in the shower. So it does not make for a great recording to do it right then and there. So I just have to kind of wait until I'm out, and then type it up and post
Right.
it on Facebook to get
Right.
people.
Right. 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 Right.
But yeah, when things just make so little sense, I just wonder if I'm alone in the world when I think that, this is weird. You can't
Yeah.
charge so much money for college, which, by the way, we'll talk about student debt or not,
Yeah. Yeah.
That's another topic that I talk about. But you can't charge so much money for tuition when you're having the kids be home and doing online schooling. Some of these universities even have an offshoot of online classes. Penn
Sure.
State has an entire thing called World Campus, which is
Mhm.
all online. And the tuition cost for that is basically half as much as the tuition cost for on campus learning, in lecture centers and classrooms. But if you're going to shift the kids towards an online learning environment, I think it would just make sense that the tuition dollars for, in person ends up getting shifted and prorated down
Sure.
for the online sphere, especially if you already have that standard set in place at the university. But sometimes I feel like I'm alone in thinking all
Oh,
that.
I'm sure you're not. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that were thinking the same thing. I mean, look, we're not even, you know, we're not even there yet,
Yeah,
and things have not opened up yet. You know, some of the financial stuff that we're waiting for, you know, everything's just shut down right now. They're not, you know, and I'm sitting here thinking I like to have things done. You know, I like to be done and ready and planned and prepared. You know, she goes to school in beginning of August. I don't want to be July 31st filling out paperwork for student loans or whatever the hell it may be, you know, but because of everything going on with the pandemic, there's just a ton of stuff that has not, it's just
yeah,
on
it
hold.
hasn't been cleared up. You don't know what's.
Yeah. So,
But you know what? As parents, we try and give our kids the best shot at being better than we were. Be
sure.
smarter, be more successful. However you define success, just
Hmm.
be a notch above where we are, and we're going to try and give you those tools for you to get ahead. But I think a lot of people have to come to grips with, you can't. $250,000 is a lot of money to pay for one child's education.
Yeah,
And
you're not kidding.
you're talking about, this is your retirement. This is your future as an adult, as an aging adult.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sacrifice that in order to give this to your kid, or do you let your kid graduate with so much student debt that they'll never even make their way out of it? That's not
Right.
responsible parenting either.
Right. Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
These are my shower conversations.
Well, they're good ones. You, you get some good debates in that mirror, that's for sure.
Oh, and then how's the rest of the family doing? You do make some sacrifices, working a full-time job and also being a volunteer firefighter and putting your life on the line, for God's sakes. You're a father of two, a husband of one, and that's got to come at a cost to your family to have you.
Yeah, it everybody's good. I mean, the the other benefit to the pandemic is I've been home probably more over the last. I think my welcome is wearing out. I've been home so much. but yeah, because I'm usually on the run, whether I'm at the training center, at the firehouse, or wherever. I'm usually go at least a few nights a week where I'm not home, and and now I have been. But everybody's doing well. Kelly's been super busy at work. um she works for the.
One of the industries that picked up more
What's
in the
that?
pandemic time frame. Is she part of one of the industries that business
Well,
has?
she works for the county, and she works with the Office of the Aging, and they actually created. So you have your emergency operations center, which is happening during these types of things, which is your fire, your police, your EMS, your county county emergency management office. They all come together during these, any type of event such as this. um, well, she ended up being part of a group called the Emergency Care Assistance Center.
Mm,
So they were organizing masks and food and prescription pickup, and
yeah.
all these things that that seniors can't do for themselves.
Hmm.
They became a hub for like I said, food collection and all that. They started a mask brigade. When masks uh, became a shortage. They started this mask brigade where they were getting people that were home with nothing to do, but
Making masks.
making masks and donating them, and then they would get them out to where they needed to go. So she's been really busy with that.
Yeah.
And my full time in the plumbing, heating, and electrical world, wholesale distribution, thankfully, is essential also.
Hmm.
And we had to make some adjustments, but thankfully we've remained busy. And
That's good.
yeah, it's been a challenge, though. It's definitely been a challenge. But
Memorable. Let's
yeah,
uh, let's hope things go back to a normal, but a better normal. The
yeah,
normal
I agree.
wasn't the best normal. Maybe we'll get to an even better normal.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
think
where the
so.
vet always comes out and picks up the dog from.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but
Awesome.
we'll see. It's all we can hope for, right?
Yeah. Well, say the name of your podcast one more time, and I certainly encourage people to go take a listen, especially if you're a firefighter, professional volunteer, or any sort of first responder, because I'm sure you can all learn from each other.
Thank you. So yeah, the name of the podcast is The Professional Volunteer. You can just search that in any of the podcast players, or I'm putting it up on YouTube now, so you can find it there as well. And Instagram and Facebook at Professional Volunteer. And it's the easiest way to find me.
Perfect.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Thank you so much. Keep
All
doing
right.
great work.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.